Okay, can you all hear me okay? All right. We are going to get started because we don't want to waste any time before getting to the panelist presentation. So I wanted to give a quick introduction. Welcome, hello, thank you for being here. This is the 2025 Digital Scholarship Symposium. We're really excited to host this again this year in collaboration with the Center for Excellence in Arts and Humanities. So thank you all for being here. And we have a great set of presentations lined up and even greater representation this year from schools across Iowa and lots of different activities that are being done in relation to public digital arts and humanities and digital scholarship in the classroom. So we have a real treat for you today in the form of these panels. So I hope you'll join us in between panels for lunch right upstairs. So we'll just kind of file up there to the rotunda after the last question and answer session this morning. But I think that's all that I have to fill you in on. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Matt Civils to kick off our first panel.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. This is a larger crowd than we had last year. I'd like to every year see it grow a little bit. It's a lot of fun, and what a great space we're in too. When I first came on to be the director of the Center for Excellence in Arts Humanities, I saw this space and I thought, wait, we need to have an event here. This is like a set of Star Trek or something, and it's got some of you are in the Pac-Man seats. They look like Pac-Man, but they are like the best seats in the house if you didn't know. So we're going to keep our presenters to 10 minutes today. And then we're going to let them go nuts at the end of their presentations. We're all at the very end, after the last presenter spoken, we'll then open things up for questions. And then I think that's always for me the really exciting part, because I get to hear also what you all are doing and what's on your minds. So our first presenter today is Laura Carpenter. Laura is a PhD candidate in American Studies at the University of Iowa. She's the digital public historian of the digital archival project Hobo Archive, created in partnership with the U.S. rail riding community. Her current work centers on the study of contemporary transient culture and its connections with the historical traditions of hoboing and tramping. The title of Laura's talk is Hobo Archive, Digital Archiving American Hobo History and Culture.
All right. You can hear me okay? All right, we made it. Hello, everyone. Laura here with Hobo Archive. Thank you so much for having me and my project and also the Hobos here today to tell you a little bit about the ways in which we can use digital technologies to engage with marginalized cultural groups in America and work together to try and document and preserve their history and culture. This is Hobo Archive. I really want to kind of just take you on a story today about how this project emerged, because this is very much people-centered. It started with a storytelling project that emerged into a larger conversation about what it means to preserve a cultural group that probably won't exist in the next 50 years or so, but also the ways that we can create models of digital scholarship at the intersection of history and cultural studies, digital humanities work, and community engagement, public history work, and so on and so on. So yeah, thank you so much again today. So this project, Hobo Archive, started with the state of Iowa, right? Iowa is, I would say, historically been a jumping off point for people moving westward, specifically hobos and tramps. Now, a hobo is defined as a person who travels for the sole purpose of working, okay, that working lifestyle. The figure of the hobo, probably in the American imagination, the memories of your parents, your grandparents, somebody who used the railroad as a means to get from one seasonal job to another. And this is a culture that I would say is dying, is in a sense of urgency and crisis. Number of factors for that reasoning, mainly because of the modernization of technology, the changing of seasonal work throughout time. But Iowa has long been a home for people of these transient identities. Famous hobo jungles in Davenport, in Sioux City, in Council Bluffs. But most importantly, something that's going on in Britt, Iowa to this day is the National Hobo Convention, a place where people have gathered for over 120 years of various transient identities. And basically they gather to celebrate and commemorate their culture and their heritage. And so really Hobo Archive started in Britt, Iowa. Part of my dissertation research is going into these transient communities and trying to collect as many stories as possible. So starting with people and using storytelling as an incredible tool of engagement with people as well. And so got to the point where in 2021, went to the Hobo Convention, gathered a handful of stories and ran into the issue of, how are we going to properly store and house these stories and make them accessible, right? And talking to a lot of cultural advisors and leaders in the community, our conversation really snowballed into this idea of creating a digital archive. And so that, let's see here. That is what we talked about amongst the community members. And so I include these individuals here to really kind of paint a picture of who these people are. And as you can see, even though within Hobo history, kind of the image of the Hobo has long been seen as a white male man, transients today are actually a lot more diverse, okay? And so looking at Bazman here, he's a young Black man currently leading kind of the younger writers across the country and organizing them. Looking at Sunrise, who worked in hospice for many years. She was actually also a minister and turned to riding rails as an escape. K-Bar was a former Marine who has ridden rails in the past, but now has turned to van life. Looking at Empress Vagabond Lump, she rode the rails during World War II. She's 93, still shows up to that convention every year. By golly, good for her. And Minneapolis Jewel is a really well-known female writer who actually has a jungle of her own where transients come together in Minneapolis. So really, these are the people who I started working with and who helped me collaborate on creating this place where people can go to access their stories. Ooh, there you go. Okay, so like I said, storytelling was really the base for the creation of this archive, okay? And thinking about the ways that we can use storytelling to bridge community engagement, to bring together writers from across the country. But stories are cultural artifacts, right? Okay. And also they're a gateway to creating a safe space with these rail riders themselves, okay? But also using place-based heritage sites like Britt to study the ways in which their memories are embedded within the built environment that they associate with as well. So our primary questions leading this archive was, one, how could digital technologies be used to preserve the histories of marginalized cultural groups in America? And also, what might a participatory digital archive look like? And how could it be used to build community? And that's what led me to the Digital Publishing Scholarship Studio at University of Iowa. Went to them with this crazy idea. Hey, I want to create a digital archive for this community of people, and literally took a village, and we worked together, including Nikki White here in the front. We created this digital archive by using the wonderful staff at the digital studio at the University of Iowa. And so, did it go? That's what led us to utilizing methods in digital humanities work, public history, community engaged research, but also dabbling in my own discipline in American studies as well. And so we started to think about the ways in which we wanted to collect cultural artifacts within the community, things that the community members want to preserve in the long run, moving beyond just stories and looking at the materiality of culture, right? A lot of stuff in grandma's attic scenarios came to be. But as we collect those things, we had to, of course, dabble in the digital technologies in ways that we could make them accessible to the public. And we did so through the use of Omeka in the Dublin core fields as well, but relying on crowdsourced data collection. All right, and also community knowledge sharing, right? So the idea behind the archive is, yes, a place where the community can contribute items of their own that they would like to see documented and preserved in the long run, okay? Everything from stories to photographs to media to, gosh, cultural artifacts, artwork, let's see here, tramp art. We had a lot of tramp art, popular culture items, but also intellectual creative works as well within the community, like the community members, what they have written over time as well, their histories. And so really the Hobo Archive emerged as a blueprint for greater civic engagement and public history projects in Iowa and across the US. So focusing on digitally enabled participation through crowdsourcing, looking at post-custodial archival practices. Now, this is a community that it doesn't have the resources necessarily to create a physical environment of their own, to like a museum to house these items. So we move towards post-custodial methods to create digital reproductions of the things that they want to include in the archive. We also utilize method of shared historical authority. So thinking about the ways in which we are giving agency to the community members themselves to write their own histories, but also looking at how we can utilize methods of community engagement as well. And here's an example of some of kind of the behind the scenes work that we've been working on using Excel spreadsheets, of course, trying to properly categorize all contributed items, to create metadata schemas using keywords, using a standardized language that works for the community, but also making it accessible for the public writ large. And so these are a collection of matchbook covers that were donated to the archive. And so as you can see here, we're trying to create kind of a consistent language use, right? That people can be able to refer to, keywords they can type into the archive to look for, but also to distinguish between what might be more culturally authentic items versus non-authentic items as well. And so lastly, I just want to touch on where the archive stands today and sort of the new exciting avenues that have been created in the past year. Last spring, I took my Hobo grandpa out to California and we visited the Black Butte Center for Railroad Culture, which is basically like the West Coast version of Britt, Iowa. And this is a place where rail riders in the West Coast gather. And so we created a new partnership with the Black Butte Center, which has created new challenges for us on how to expand this archive just out from the Midwest, looking at different regionalities in the US, but also new challenges like, well, creating new partnerships means we are inviting new site users, right? A lot of younger riders are now accessing the archive. So we're always testing the site's usability, curating the metadata to reflect rail riding culture in different regionalities. So the differences between Midwest culture and West Coast culture, looking at the ways in which we can differentiate between culturally authentic materials and perhaps other materials like pulp culture, stereotypes of hobos and tramps, but also keeping in mind that welcoming new community members means that we have to stay true to our mission and vision as well. So yeah, there are really exciting new things happening with the archive, and creating partnerships like what we're doing in Dunsmuir right now is allowing the archive to expand and grow. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Our next presenter is Bettina Fabos. Bettina is director of the Fortepon U.S. Cooperative Photo History Portal and its prototype, Fortepon, Iowa. Both projects display curated family snapshots and historical photographs from the 19th and 20th century. Through her work with Fortepon US, Fabos has initiated the development of new archival platform tools for digital storytelling and geolocation. Bettina's talk today is creating beautiful online stories with the new open source FotoStory tool.
Okay, thanks. Thanks everyone, and thanks to Olivia for setting this whole thing up. I'm happy to be here, and I'm hoping today to connect the dots a little bit between, let's see, between this digital project, which you see here. It's a vast digital humanities project that led to this Hungarian project that then led to the US equivalent of that Hungarian project. And then that led to my ability to share the kind of tool building that anybody now has access to. So I just wanted to, there's only 10 minutes, so I just wanted to connect the dots, and feel free to explore any of the projects that I'm introducing and talk to me afterwards. So, so this project, Proud and Torn, is the story of my father and his sister. They're Hungarian kids. This is them in the 1930s, and I got a Fulbright in Hungary to go to Hungary to spend 6 months researching the photo history of Hungary. I was really interested in the story of these two people and the context, and also I'm a visual creative, and I wanted to share this story in a really digital, interactive, and visual way. So working with 2 amazing historians and 3 developers, coders, and a designer. The project resulted in 16 chapters that appear along a timeline, and you can see there's lots of images. There's 1,000 images in this piece that are all kind of carefully crafted. Each one of these squares here represents a vertical, a pretty long vertical. It takes 20 minutes to read each one of these chapters, and you can zip along the chapters. You know, you can go to 1945, you can go to 1930. For some reason, when I'm connected to Zoom, it doesn't allow the the cool, you know, stripping. I don't know why Zoom does that, but if you go on your own, you'll see it kind of in a really cool way. And if you click on any of these chapters, this is the same 2 people that the story is about, this family and the town they lived in Hungary. You can see that there's just a vertical story. There's lots of animation, very subtle animation inspired by Harry Potter, actually. And just like lots of ways of creating stories that just make things beautiful, but make things accessible, you know, for 8th graders, or for, you know, they like to spot the little animations, to you know, just people who love digital interactive storytelling, who like graphic novels, who love visuality. So this project is the way it is because I was looking in lots and lots of archives to build it. And some of the images, like this Hitler image, is very well known. It's in the public domain, that kind of stuff. But a lot of the images also came from my own family collections, and then was also dependent on family photos. I wanted to tell a story of Hungary from the ground up. I wanted to tell stories of everyday people. I didn't want to talk about the famous men who are always like part of the national narrative of Hungary. I wanted to tell the story of the family members, and all the chapters really dictate the sequence of the whole digital story. In my efforts in Hungary to search through all these national history museums and ethnography museums and all this stuff, somebody told me about this incredible new archive. At the time, it was 4 or 5 years old. It was Hungarian. And they had released all of these family snapshots, but now they're working in partnership with other institutions that are just sort of like the preservation of everyday people. And all the images are released to the Creative Commons. Everything is available for public download, and everything is in high resolution, which is really great for me because, wow, you know, I don't know if you know about the process of searching, doing photo history and stuff. I mean, it's just like every time you order an image, it's $25. Every time you use an image, it's another $25. It would have been absolutely impossible for me to create Proud and Torn in any way that was at the level that I could. And so I could download any of these images. I could play with them. I could experiment with them. If it didn't work, it didn't matter because I didn't have any any, there was no cost. And the search was so different, there's a whole digital preservation tradition that is based on provenance and historical original order that many of you I'm sure know about, but it really sticks photos in sort of like almost like a straitjacket when you're searching them. And to be released from that was amazing, to be able to go anywhere on a timeline, to be able to type in any, any word and find images that related to this family history was really unbelievable for me. And so while I was building Proud and Torn, I also decided to build Fortipon version of the archive in Iowa. So started in at UNI, started with my own, I teach a digital culture class, and I had my students bring in 30 images of their own family and taught them how to scan, taught them how to upload, worked with my colleagues in history and interactive digital studies and in art. And then we created an amazing platform that does exactly the same as what the Hungarian is doing, but it was for Iowa, and now we've since expanded to every state. We have a relationship with the University of Connecticut. We have a relationship with the University of Minnesota. We have a relationship with University of Colorado. So we're kind of like building these Fortipons, and we're now connecting to a movement internationally. So anybody can download these photos and do things with them and tell stories, which is the whole point. A lot of people, when Proud and Torn was finished, they were like, oh, I want to do this myself. How did you do this? And I'm like, well, you know what? It's all hand coded. It is not easy to put something like this together by yourself. I mean, it's just like a lot of 6 years of work actually went into this project, and a lot of hours. And yet I feel like it's really important to be able to tell stories and to make these tools accessible. So the project with Fortipon started expanding with grant writing. I got a National Archive grant to create a digital storytelling tool that I wanted to just very, very briefly demo for you right now. And then also we get an NEH grant for a photo matching geolocation tool. So if you're interested, the purpose was really to tell you the digital storytelling tool, but if there's interest, I can do a demo of that as well. Quick, here it is. So you can kind of see what it's looking like. Let me go to the digital exhibit tool. So if you go to an account, anybody can create an account. Everything is free. Everything is public. So the whole ethic of this project is sharing and releasing things to the public in Creative Commons. So you can create your own customized photo albums. So as you can see, I have a lot of different photo albums: butts on the fence, elbows, gender fluidity, holding cats. Does anyone want to see any of these? Is there a name? Saggy couches, standing in corn. So, if you click on standing in corn, I have found all the images, all in chronological order of people standing in corn. If I go to kitchen twist, I think it's hilarious that all these people in the kitchen are like, oh, hello, and the people are, so you can customize, and you can, I was telling Matthew that you can take any filtered version of the archive. I can click on kitchen twist. I can go into the info button. I can click on milk, and I have all the images in chronological order that are tagged with milk. So it's very powerful. You can organize the image according to tags, and you can organize the image according to your own standing in corn or whatever you want. So you take a photo album, and in this case, I'm going to use a photo album called Faves, and you create a photo story. So I go to FotoStory, I click on Faves, I hit create, I go to Faves over here, and I have a pretty easy interface where I can click on, I don't know, I have one hand here because I have to hold the microphone, so I'm just going to click on Faves, okay? And I can change, there's lots of different levels of text. I'm going to grab some lorem ipsum image text here, and where am I? and I can add my first image from the faves. These are all my favorite pictures, so I'll just take this image here, and you can see how quickly you can go. I have 7 options. So let's see, I'll choose this vertical option here. I'll add some text. I'll add another group of text here. Okay, and maybe another one. And I'll click on, like, I don't know, let's see what the image is going to be before I title it. Let's see, girl with the chicken. Yeah. And then I'll just say chicken. I'll go down and add another block, maybe on the other side, add another image. This is great for teaching. If anybody is like, you know, assignment for class, I can add some more text. I can add pig. They're standing next to a pig. Let's do just 2 more so you can see the end result. A full content block that I can either fit to the page or not. I'll have this image, and then I can add some text here. And one more maybe. Let's see, a 2-image block where I can add, let's see, the woman playing the violin. And let's see, a woman kind of standing in a cool way with her hand on her head. And then I can add credits at the end. Okay, so I can preview at any time. My preview looks like this. Am I good? Okay. And so you can share this with anyone. You can embed this in a website. You can watch it on a mobile phone because it's completely, and okay, so it takes 6 years to make Proud and Torn, but it took 1 minute to make this digital storytelling tool. So this is for everybody. I hope you use it. We put a lot of effort and work into it, and it's there for anybody to use. So that's all I'll say. Thank you, and I'll turn it to the next person. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'm going to be looking for, I'll be seeing Kitchen Twist everywhere after this. Our next presenter is Tierney Steelberg. Tierney is a digital liberal arts specialist at Grinnell College's Digital Liberal Arts Collaborative and a co-lead of the Vivero Digital Fellows Program. She has a master's degree in information science from the University of Michigan and has spent her career promoting digital scholarship at small liberal arts colleges. Tierney's talk today is developing undergraduate students as collaborators on public humanities projects.
Thank you so much. Great to be here with y'all. So again, the talk is developing undergraduate students as collaborators on these kinds of projects, and I'm going to talk about this through the lens of, can folks hear me okay? Okay, great. I sounded quiet to myself. Through the lens of the Vivero Digital Fellows Program at Grinnell, which I co-lead. So first, a little bit about kind of what is Vivero, and then I'll plan to talk to you a little bit about how we train the students, some of the kind of the training elements with that public humanities, digital humanities focus, and then towards the end, I'll share a few examples of some projects that Vivero Fellows have supported. So Vivero is a paid student employment program that empowers undergraduate students as digital scholars kind of across disciplines, across skill levels. We have students coming in with humanities backgrounds who are interested in kind of a training in digital tools. And we also have students coming in, you know, computer science and STEM backgrounds who are interested in learning kind of more about a humanistic mindset or toolkit or digital humanities, you know, values and approaches. So the students, the fellows, work kind of a two-pronged position. They collaborate on digital projects that are led by faculty and staff, and they also provide peer mentoring drop-in hours for, you know, their undergraduate peers who are working on digital assignments by staffing regular weekly drop-in hours. So the goals of the Vivero program are to diversify the content, methods, and practitioner community of digital scholarship, to build this kind of ongoing pool on campus of qualified student collaborators, to support students from underrepresented groups to pursue digital scholarship, to expand postgraduate kind of employment opportunities for students by developing their skills and also helping them work on kind of significant research, significant hands-on opportunities, and also connecting Grinnell to the larger digital liberal arts community. And the support for Vivero on campus is two-pronged as well. So there's two co-leads. One's a staff member from the Digital Liberal Arts Collaborative, that's me, and the other is a faculty member from the library. So I'd like to shout out here my fellow co-lead, Liz Rodriguez, who's the Humanities and Digital Scholarship Librarian at Grinnell and who co-founded Vivero back in 2017. So the training for Vivero has as kind of a, digital humanities as a public scholarship focus. And I think that we approach the at Grinnell, we sometimes call it digital liberal arts because that's just our terminology for it. But that through that kind of lens of those humanistic values. So some of the kind of the more formal training pieces for the students. One is a 2-credit half-semester class called Digital Project Development and Practice that the two Vivero co-leads co-teach, and that's basically an opportunity for students to get kind of for credit as a kind of a companion opportunity to the job, a sense of digital humanities methods and theory, the kinds of things, doing readings and having discussions, the kinds of things that are harder to do on the job. And, threaded throughout our we're thinking about the kind of different ethical considerations in digital humanities, thinking about things like, ethical collaboration with students and also with community partners, labor, metadata, kind of levels of access and sharing, and kind of reading and discussing throughout. And then also touching upon some digital tools, but also thinking critically about them. So kind of reviewing the tools that we're using and having students build their own kind of critical toolkits. So thinking about questions like, is this an open source or proprietary tool? Who created it? Who maintains it? What kind of data or input does it require? Who owns that data or input once you put it in? So encouraging students to kind of develop that critical toolkit. And then to build technical skills kind of during their work hours, basically. Students kind of work on collaborative training modules with fellows during their shared kind of drop-in hours, so focusing on specific tools, things like WordPress or Omeka, and then also specific kind of skills that were things we felt like we could compartmentalize in that way. So things like accessibility, web accessibility, or documentation, like encouraging the students to kind of develop those approaches. They also work to build out portfolio websites, which they use to showcase not only their Vivero work, but kind of their full scholarly selves. It's not necessarily required, but encouraged to kind of showcase their accomplishments across the board. And then they also use those portfolio websites as blogs to share weekly kind of reflective blog posts reflecting on their learning or on their project work, on the things that they've accomplished that week, to kind of build in that reflective learning mindset. And so I think, the approach that we're taking for this kind of student development in digital scholarship is through this lens of like humanistic skills or humanistic values. And so through the program, we emphasize things like, communication and collaboration, considering, the ethics of the tools that we're using or the ways that we're collaborating or the projects that we're embarking on, this regular reflection piece, reflecting on learning, asking kind of critical questions and critical thinking, and how are we kind of entering into both the students in their portfolios and the work that they're doing, but also on the projects that they're working on. How are they entering into larger kind of scholarly conversations and embarking upon their own kind of public scholarship? And I think that the mindset that we're fostering and the kind of the way we're thinking about some of these things is building out students' own, approaches, and as kind of a digital toolkit is some of the most valuable work that we do with our fellows. And we know that because they tell us that it's what sticks with them. So they, we've heard from students that they'll, even after they leave the program and move to another campus job, we have a student who is, I think, a neuroscience major or minor, and was doing a summer research opportunity with a professor in neuroscience and encouraged him to build out a website for his lab based on some of the the approaches that she learned about through Vivero. And so it's things that they bring with them into other arenas, other scholarly fields, but also things they're bringing with them as they're pursuing graduate study in related fields or pursuing kind of employment or internships that build on and nurture these skills. And so kind of in the latter portion of the talk, wanted to share some examples of projects for you to learn a little bit more about what the fellows that kind of work on in a hands-on way. just to note that Vivero supports projects across disciplines, but as it kind of turns out, many of them are in the arts and humanities. And also, interestingly, recently, an increasing number in kind of staff-led departments on campus. So working, for example, with like our development and alumni office to build out kind of like an archive relating to a campus film festival, institutional, kind of the institutional memory, and work on planning a website in relation to some events. So just kind of as the word gets out that this is a pool of qualified student collaborators, people from different areas on campus are kind of interested in collaborating. So each project team is working under the leadership of a Grinnell College faculty or staff member, and the program pays for the student wages and supports the fellows through that kind of the training and the mentoring, which I think frees the project leads up from some of that administrative burden of needing to manage student employees, so they don't have to do things like approve timesheets. We take care of that for them, and they're freed up to just do the work with the students. And so the first example I wanted to mention is one called Mapping Islamophobia that is led by Professor Caleb Elfenbein, who's in the History and Religious Studies departments. So the links to the projects are on the slides. I won't necessarily go out to them in the interest of time, but they're also linked on the Vivero website, which I'll share later so you can get to them from there. But so this is a project, kind of a long-running project that's in its more now maintenance phase, is kind of wound down, so it doesn't actively have a fellow working on it, but worked to map incidents of Islamophobia across the United States, kind of going back to 2001 and then ending in 2023. And then as well, kind of iterated and started to map incidents countering Islamophobia across the country. So things like instances of community outreach or interfaith activities, mosque open houses, those kinds of things. And it's I think it was active for maybe 8 or so years and was supported over that time by I think 4 or 5 Vivero fellows, some of them who worked, multi-year stints on the project, and they did things like updating the website, kind of updating, refining, and working on the data set, building it out, and also working on some sections of independent research. So there's a past fellow who worked on a section on the website about Muslim candidates for political office, for example. Another example, kind of in another vein, is the Georgia Dentel and Grinnell Concert History Project. This is under the leadership of Professor Sarah Purcell, who's teaches in history and also in digital studies at the college. And this is kind of more of a institutional history project looking into the history of a former Grinnell employee named Georgia Dentel, who was instrumental in bringing some really historic path-breaking concerts to campus, and helped organize these during the, I think, a little over 40 years that she was an employee there. And it's the site was built out by research students working with Professor Purcell, but it's newly supported this spring by a Vivero fellow who's kind of supporting ongoing website updates. It's a pretty new project, and working on digital components like timelines and some digital collections linked on the project. And then I think if time permits, I've got one more project I wanted to talk about. 1 minute. Okay, I'll make it quick. So this one's Mapping Spanish Detective Fiction, led by Professor Nick Phillips, who's in the Spanish department. And this is a nice example to end on in terms of a digital humanities project that has been through, as so many projects have been, multiple iterations in its life cycle. So originally the project was more in line with the faculty members' own research, working to map places mentioned in Spanish detective novels. And then later iterations, he kind of worked with students in his classes, and they would map things from the novels. He got very interested in not just having the students kind of support his research, but in empowering them to be able to engage in their own kind of digital work. So the later iterations of the Vivero support for the project and the project itself focused more on the pedagogical piece of having students do mapping work and build out their own data sets from the reading they were doing, of this kind of upper level Spanish class focused on Spanish detective novels. So the Vivero fellows supported both those research components and some of those later pedagogical components, kind of helping the students learn those skills and supporting the class. Yeah, so that was also just in time. So thank you so much for your engagement. I've got here my email and also the link to the Vivero website. So would certainly welcome y'all to take a look there if you wanted to see more examples of projects, kind of past and current projects, and links to the information about the fellows and links to their portfolios if you wanted to go out to those. So thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, our final presenter is Dr. Lucía Suárez. Dr. Suárez is Associate Professor of Spanish and Director of the Latino Studies program here at ISU. She's authored or edited 4 books or special issues and over 24 articles. This summer, she participated in the NEH Cooney Graduate Center Summer Institute for Open Education Publishing Institute, which ignited the project she is leading in her class, Latino, Latinx Life Stories, of which she will be speaking. Today's talk is Pedagogy and Digital Humanities, Iowan Latino Memoirs.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you all for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here. I love this space. And thank you for sharing your projects. I'm already figuring out ways that I'm going to connect. So thank you. So that's my first is I'm just really grateful to be here. And of course, as happens often to me, the title is slightly changed. It's Iowan Latino Life Stories, Oral Histories, and Open Access Student Memoir Publications. And the reason is that as I was figuring out how to tell you about the second part, which is the memoirs, I can't not tell you about the first part, which is how I got really hooked into working digitally. And so the story starts with COVID. So everything locks down. I know I was miserable in a little closed space, and I have this energy. I needed to go and find projects. And lucky me, I was in contact just a year earlier with Maggie Rivas, and she is the director of the Voces of a Pandemic Oral History Project. So she's actually the director of the Oral History Project at University of Texas, Austin. And she put together an oral history project for the pandemic. And that's how it all started. I spoke to the librarians here, and it's a 13 community consortium, so Rutgers, all throughout the country. And we found ourselves meeting every other week, thinking about the stories, right? So it started an oral history project. And one of the things that I was able to get a student who started as an independent study, and that's a whole story unto itself, but I won't take up that time. And what ended up for me, what was going around in my head was community engaged learning, and then traditional classroom work in digital humanities. And I started thinking in person with community partners through digital, how do we connect our students in meaningful ways? And then in the classroom this semester, high impact learning that lasts a lifetime. So it's not just you've got this semester, you're doing this work and bye. It's sort of how can you be engaged digitally? So the USLS Spanish English, because it's cross-listed, 3770 Latina OX Life Stories was initially funded by a Miller faculty grant. So we've got, I'm alone in this room. I connect to this fantastic director at UT Austin. I find this phenomenal student who takes on, is part of the programming that we do every 2 weeks. And we find ourselves listening to each other's stories, going out there and interviewing people, doing oral histories of people who are surviving the pandemic, and in some cases, people who have lost people from the pandemic. And the focus was always the Latina community in Iowa, because the Latina community in Iowa is not always necessarily visible. When you think of Iowa, you don't think of a huge Latino community, but I know that University of Iowa has been doing projects, for years, long before even this project, of people from Latin America have been in Iowa for over 150 years. They call Iowa home, right? So you can be an Iowan with a Spanish sounding name and know you did not just arrive, as well as many people are in Iowa because they have been they've been solicited to work on our farms, right? So it started with the oral histories, and then I applied to get this class. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the Voices of the Pandemic. It was 2020, 2021, a little bit of 2022. This Iowa project was developed with the Voices of the Pandemic, organized by Dr. Maggie Rivas Rodriguez, connecting 13 institutions. we now have it at the library. You can click and see it. We have a total of 18, so I think one still has to be uploaded, but it's looking great. So I'm really happy that we can all click in and see that. So there's 18 from Iowa. The other institutions, the other 13, have done many more. University of Texas, Austin really did a full-time project. So we have over 600 oral histories, and we are part, U.S. Latino Studies is part, and Parks Library and Iowa and ISU are part of this national consortium. So now you're kind of getting the idea of what happened. I'm isolated in this, I have this connection, I have a student, and then I find myself thinking, wow, how can we learn and teach and create expansively? So once the oral histories of the pandemic were completed, I felt like we need to continue, right? So the Iowan Latino Oral History Project now, so each class we do a focus on memoirs and oral histories, and the oral histories are focused on belonging and education. So we have our students this semester are doing oral histories. They're doing oral histories of Latinos at Iowa. So Iowa State had Latino students in Iowa who identify as Latino. So if you identify as Latino and you live in Iowa and you identify as someone, I'm Iowan, right? Then you would be somebody who would be part of this collection. So focused on belonging and education. We have collections from 2023, 2024, and now at the end of the semester, we'll have, all of our students will have uploaded 2025. So each year, it's a growing collection of Iowan Latino Oral History Project. That's part of the class. One of the issues, or one of the things that I really focus on for my class, is learning tools for today's world. Community building for student health and well-being. Because if this all started in isolation in this room, it meant that I was kind of depressed. And it was those every other week meeting with all of these fabulous people doing this work and then listening to the stories of people surviving or not surviving. It just makes us feel not alone in the world. And it also makes us realize that what we do, it's meaningful. It can make a difference. And not just me, but my students, but the collaborators in other cities and other states. And so so when I teach the class has a traditional side, right? So we do oral history, ethics, practice, historical evolution. We do theoretical readings, Alessandro Portelli, Alistair Thompson, Rebecca Sharpless. Then we do transcript collecting, we do editing, we talk about AI, we use AI. So one of the things about this work is that it's dynamic and it's always shifting, it's always growing. We're always connecting to new people, so that my students are being given life skills, not only about reading and understanding history, but understanding their place both in making history and also being part of that history, right? So there's the digital archiving, and they connect them to JC, the reviewing, editing, working with library archivists. I have them working in pairs and groups to review and get to know the details, right? So it's not like each one goes off and does their archive and that's it. I have them share them because it's not just one, it's all. And these stories are vastly different. It's not like, oh, they're all Latino Iowans and we're going to be the same. They're vastly different. So I also ask them to practice listening and compassion. So that one of the things I find in the world that we live right now, listening is hard and being compassionate is even harder. And that is part of my work with my students. Okay, I see the 2-minute sign. So part 2 of this story, and I'm going to have to rush through this, is that last summer, I was lucky enough to be part of the Open Education Publishing Institute, OEPI, of collaborative knowledge and social justice. And that's where I decided to do another part of the writing, and it's memoirs, because we've been working with memoirs with students in Marshalltown. So really quickly, the students in Marshalltown are high school students. I have a community partner there, Mrs. Stutches. And at that time, and again, talk about changing titles, this title will be shifted with the input of the class because it's our memoirs and they should be, but initially it was We Too Are America, staking our place in the heartland through Latina OX Iowa Memoirs. And the whole point was to create, and we have created, we have that, we have been doing that this is our 3rd year doing it actually. So Marshalltown is a stable partnership, and also a number of our students from the workshop at Marshalltown are now ISU students. That makes me really happy, because for me, the whole point is that the digital should be expanding the possibility of humanities and our humanism, of our work together as simple people, just talking to each other and connecting, right? So through the memoirs, we encourage cross-cultural conversations about identity, social justice, and belonging to rural Iowa. And we reject stereotypes. I mean, it's easy to stereotype when you don't know someone, but once you start hearing people's personal, intimate stories through their memoirs, the stereotype goes out the window. And it's powerful. We have meetings, and we'll have our final reading on May 3rd, and then it'll be published. So, stay tuned. I'll give everybody the information of the publication. It's open access, and it's going to be through the community CUNY Graduate Center Open Commons. This is just a little bit of a picture, and we're almost at 0. This is the class, because it's so important to me for us to connect. And it's connected to another sample of another college class, and that's the sample that we use. That's information you already got, and thank you.
So this is my favorite part, where I go around with the microphone, Phil Donahue style, if you remember him, and take excellent questions from you all. So I'll just open the floor to questions, and then I'll come around. So who has a question? This is where I make a joke about getting steps in, but there's not any really funny ones, and you've heard them all before.
Hello, thank you all for being here, sharing your projects. I'm Greg Bailey. I'm the head of Special Collections and University Archives here at Iowa State. So one of the things I think about with these projects, I mean, they're very interesting. They're collecting, sharing information, and it's also coming back in, selfishly, kind of my side of things from archives is, once some of you talked a little bit about the life cycle of those projects and how that information lives on, or those projects potentially could live on after, say, you retire as a faculty member, and what your future planning is for those, because we don't have the resources or things to manage those projects as they are in the current world, because of the time it does to do that. And some of those softwares, they just, they meet their life cycle / vulnerability comes up to them, and how that could be something that this important information could potentially go away because we don't have the ability to continue to maintain them going forward.
So sustainability question, great one. Thank you. So it's pretty much all I think about. We have so many initiatives to this end. So the first thing is that one of the blingiest things I think we did, and this was 2 years ago, is we made every version of our project, every filtered version of the project, or the whole thing, the whole Fortabon is embeddable. So you can filter it to anything and you can embed. And so we are populating lots of libraries with little baby Fortapons that are filtered to Burlington, Iowa, or to Coralville, or to, Iowa State, maybe. So that's one thing, that just like spreading is that's our goal. But I also co-founded the Open Portal Archive Network, and guess what? There's all these other initiatives all over the world that are preserving family photos and local history. They are all, interestingly enough, outside of the GLAM, if that gallery, library, archives, and museum institutions. So they've all been born from like these amazing initiatives that are sort of like, nobody else is preserving these local history, so we're going to do it. So in Chile and in Malta and in Hungary, of course, and in Poland, and I mean, there's 13 that we've identified. So we're connecting together. Many of them are in Europe, particularly Eastern Europe, which I find really interesting. We are starting to collaborate. We have a board of directors. We have a bank account. And so the Open Portal Archive Network is on LinkedIn, and we are really motivated to find more partners and to build a common platform that is thus sustainable. So there's many interests involved, and we started in Iowa, we expanded to US, we're building partners, and we are at the very beginning stages of trying to find a new institutional home so that we're connected to a research one institution primarily, and so that we can leverage that. So I'll stop there because that was too much probably information, but again, it's all I think about. So thanks for that question.
Well, goodness. Yeah, I would agree. You know, like that is all that I think about too, as kind of the leading administrator of Hobo Archive. Our archive is very young, okay? It's very young. There's a lot of, you know, tweaks that need to be made. And the question of sustainability is definitely at the forefront of like, what is this project going to look like beyond my PhD studies, right? But there's something to be said for the University of Iowa and the Digital Studio, because I know at this stage of the game, even though that this is a very young project, there's reassurance that the project will forever be housed and stored at the Digital Studio at the University of Iowa, that digital infrastructure is in place, that we have relied upon post-custodial models, which have proven so far for this specific project to work, but also thinking about the ways in which reaching out to the community itself, spreading the word, getting younger rail riders interested in this work as well. And also the archive has turned into kind of like a safe haven for members in the community to be able to publish their own intellectual creative works. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't think I have an answer necessarily to your question. I'm so sorry, but these are always the challenges with digital projects because A, they're highly collaborative, and B, of course, they evolve over time, right? I assume all our digital projects will change as the technology changes as well. So reassurance there in a sense.
I'll just go quickly. Of course, this is something we all think about. And in my case, the oral histories from the pandemic are also housed through UT Austin, and they have them all on YouTube. So of course, any of that can go away, but, and the project with Matt done through CUNY Graduate School Center is done through Creative Commons, and it's done on Manifold, and they're directing it. So in a way, I'm hoping, counting on them, and they're very committed. So there are no guarantees, but there's hope that there, you know, I can have it there and I can have it here, that there's, you know, that there's multiple collaboration through different institutions and spaces that, you know, if it dies here, it can still live there or kind of be found over there. So what I'm hearing from all of us is that and that's what we're doing in the classroom when we're teaching our students. We're teaching them dynamic digital humanities, right? Which is, you know, both thinking about the projects, which are really, really beautiful, centered projects about people, and taking advantage of the technology with the cognizance of that technology is always changing, right? So, but that's what we're teaching in the classroom also, is that, you know, we're learning something new every day, and how do we keep it afloat? And that's the importance of the connections. You know, it's just no longer one institutional space, but connected institutional and beyond the institutional places. So that would be how I think we're all working. I hear that, right?
I'm coming at it from a slightly different perspective, not having talked about a specific project, but rather kind of this Digital Fellows program. But I want to share that it is something we emphasize for the students in the program. And we actually in the class read, it's the the web version of a talk called The Final Deaths of Digital Scholarship by Robin Camille Davis, who I think was, I don't know if she still is, but was then at NC State as a librarian. And it's something that kind of is eye-opening for the students. They hadn't necessarily, they're very excited about digital scholarship. They're kind of jumping into this world. And so they're not necessarily ready to be thinking about, well, you know, what do you do when the project dies? But it's eye-opening for them to think about. Like, she's got some graphs, like the sheer number of projects that received some sort of, I can't remember, some big DH grant in, I can't remember what year it would have been, but some year, and then like 10 years later, what percentage of them are still in existence? And it's very few, or that they're the links are dead, or those kinds of things. And so that's something that we encourage the students to build that into their mindsets when they're, and talking with the project leads as well, like that these are things to be thinking of, that a project doesn't have to live forever and can't live forever. So what when you're in control in those beginning stages, what is the life cycle that you're thinking of? And I mentioned that project mapping Islamophobia, which is now like moving more into like maintenance mode rather than active updating, that things don't have to last forever. And that's a better mindset to have, and then encouraging the students and the project leads to like break things down into their, I think as my co-panelists have been talking about, like what are the pieces that could live on longer than a website, or than some kind of a digital narrative tool or something that gets out of date when the developers stop updating it or whatever. That as long as you have your spreadsheets, you have your images as files, you have those things hosted somewhere institutionally and on your laptop, or in multiple places, things residing in special collections, whatever, that you then can, if there is the interest, like things can live on in new ways.
More thing, because I don't know why I didn't even talk about the most important thing, is that we have this code that's called Chronophoto, and it's like the base code for it serves the Fortipon project, the Fortipon US project. But we just wrote a big NEH grant that will not get funded, I'm sure, because of the situation. But we're really looking to using Chronophoto to serve scholars outside of the Fortipon amateur photo family history universe. And so we proposed, working with these 5 amazing scholars to visualize the story of suffrage, and to visualize a massacre in Mexico, to visualize, that's not a happy project, but it's really important to tell these stories, and then use all of our tools, like, our geolocation tools and our digital storytelling tools to organize and to communicate the visuals, and also anything, maps, whatever. It doesn't have to be photographs that are on this platform. So as my wonderful colleagues here were talking, I was just thinking, well, our code could serve the Hobo project. Our code could serve your project. I wish we were more, we have to make a meeting with the digital studio. And, it's like, how can we form partnerships to get our hard work out there? So sorry for taking extra time, but thanks.
Hi. Thank you so much for sharing the projects that you've created and sharing what your students have done with them. I'm coming from the perspective of a classroom teacher who wants to I'm like a crow picking up your shiny bits, and I want to implement what you're doing. I have a little bit of experience. I think Professor Steelberg, it looked like some of the projects you did were on story maps. Is that right? Okay. And then, but looking at your projects, Professor Fabos, that are on this Fortipon and then FotoStory with that looked even more like entry level in terms of me turning around next semester and trying to get my students to do a project like this, not being in the bigger picture that you guys have these larger projects and you have kind of motivation for why it needs to happen. So I'm looking for something that allows the freedom of story maps where you upload your own photos with the utility of that FotoStory that you were showing us. It seems like FotoStory only allows you to access the previously archived albums. Or maybe you can tell me between the two of you what you would suggest for how to utilize these digital platforms to just put them in the hands of students and get them going.
Yeah, I mean, I think the maybe platform agnostic responses. I think, you know, whatever it is that you are able to support, or that you have some skill in, like that's a great starting point with students in terms of something like story maps that's at the entry level, that is, you know, has a pretty you know, not too steep of a learning curve, that allows students to work with some, you know, different kinds of media and pull in text and have things that's kind of what's the word, the templatized or pre-formatted for them, like that. Those are options that are great to get students in at that entry level. If you or someone else that you're working with, if you have someone, whatever it is that's a comfortable starting point for you, will be, I think, a good starting point for your students, with you guiding them, if that makes sense.
With regards to the Fortifund project, we always say that our project is for the public, by the public, for the public. And everything is, you know, we have a whole webinar series supported by the State Historical Society of Iowa, for like showing videos that show people how to upload images and how to tag, and why we curate certain kinds of photos over others. And so we would welcome young, you know, 8th graders or 4th graders. You know, we have a whole scanning protocol that we're like, this is why you preserve images at, you know, 10,000 pixels, you know, by whatever. I mean, we're like 1300 PPI. This is why we have this this scanning protocol. And so we want to share everything we've learned to anyone. We are working with 80-year-olds. We are working with, I have trained, you know, some Boy Scouts how to geolocate in their own hometown, how to take images and, you know, and figure out where the original photo was taken, and how to upload the 360 matching image, and how to photo match it, and then how to develop a tour. So I know this stuff is accessible, and we want, our team is, everything is about helping people use the tools. So when you say that you're a teacher and you want to use the tools, we're like, how can we help you? This is exactly what we're trying to do. And it's these kinds of forums that help us, you know, go beyond LinkedIn and Facebook. Sometimes it's really hard to get the word out. And I'm relying on all of you guys to please spread the word for this open, you know, source, you know, public project, which is for the public good. So that's all I'll say.
So I am going to apologize in advance. I missed the first 2 presentations because I was teaching. So if you've already answered this, please just make me move on. As a team lead on a project that has produced information for the archives, my next consideration, along with trying to make that sustainable beyond the immediate future, is how do I partner with teachers to use that archive, perhaps even in less than optimal digital ways? So more analog projects, using the archive for research by students. Have any of you talked to other partners who maybe are outside your specific discipline about using what you've done for other courses or community training sessions? I know that this is a concern. I spent some time talking to the folks who created the Allen Archive at Georgia Tech, and they spent a lot of time developing this beautiful archive of mayoral papers, and now they need people to use it. And I don't sense, in talking to many others, that we've moved on to that kind of discussion. Who can use this thing, and how do we help them find it? Does that make sense as a broad kind of topic for discussion?
It's a good question. On a very small scale, what we do the year before, the students in the next class are viewing. So when they have their projects and their presentations are based on the work that's been done previously. So they are accessing it, right? And I'm hoping that the Iowan Latino project is used by the high schools throughout the state. I mean, my goal is that high school, so I'm in touch with different teachers and, you know, spread the word. This will all be up. You know, I'm hoping that it's completed by the end of the semester, so that I'm in contact with different high school teachers throughout the state, hoping that, in fact, they can use these in their classrooms, either as samples of digital projects or, in fact, the stories that are being told. But it's a small scale. I mean, if you're thinking about well, I don't know. I mean, to start, it's where I've kind of like thought that's a practical, actual do. So.
Okay. If you build it, they might not necessarily come. So you have to promote what you do and build partnerships. And so some of the things that we're doing is, you know, library partners and webinar series and presentations at conferences and stuff like that. So that's one thing we're doing, and making partnerships with scholars, as I mentioned before, because there's lots of different ways to use the archive. We have about 25 affiliated faculty at UNI who are using the project in their classroom, from art professors who use it as like a digital photography, you know, a way to critique images, to like English fictional writing professors who use the images as prompts to write stories, and now we have the digital storytelling tool, so they can actually tell stories with the photos. And I'm speaking just of Fort Upon, Iowa, and Fort Upon, US at this point. But my gosh, I mean, we're just learning about all these other applications. We are learning that it can be used for dementia care, you know, and like we've worked with theater classes who are like getting trained in creative care, and then getting stories from people who are living with dementia, and then putting on a play, like an incredible performance based on those stories with the photos in the background. I mean, how cool is that? We've had artists who take images and cut them out. In Grinnell, that was an amazing example of wheat pasting on huge buildings, images of people or pigs or whatever, you know, cut out, people holding fish. It's just great to take the archive out to the streets and make people aware that with a QR code, you can access that very photo. So there's so many cool things that you can do with digital projects. And again, it's about making people aware of the work through symposiums like this and others. So thanks.
Yes, Nathan Arndt from the UNI Museum and Center for Rural Schools. This question is directly for Laura. Hi, good to see you again. So the museum's working with tribes along the Ivory Coast and Peru tribal groups as well, talking about returning their objects, 3D objects. But at the same time, they feel we have holes in the collection that they still want to share with us to bring those collections in digitally, much like you were doing with the Hobo groups, the 3D objects. Can you explain kind of your boots on the ground process working with those people and how you're incorporating those 3D objects in and kind of what you're experiencing?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. And good to see you. Yeah, so we rely upon crowdsourced data collection, which means that we rely upon the community members to contribute, essentially donate items, right, to the archive and share knowledge behind those items, right? Whether those are personal family artifacts, whether they're things they have written, whether things they've collected through the years, or for example, tramp art they created in hobo jungles. They submit those items. They provide us with all the information through a guided questionnaire that we provide for them. Basic questions that help us fill out those Dublin core fields, right? Like, what is the object? What's the time period it comes from? Do you have a story behind it, et cetera, et cetera? And through that knowledge sharing, through that information we collect, we're able to create the metadata behind that, right? To properly write the history behind each cultural artifact. Now, as I mentioned previously, we do rely upon post-custodial methods, which means that we take the item, we digitally reproduce it, and then we return that artifact back to the owner, mainly because we don't have a physical space to house these things. But also like preservation, sustainability in the long run too. Having that digital reproduction is vital. And so really, it's through that method of crowdsourced data collection, but also shared historical authority too. There's a Hobo museum in Britt, your typical small town museum. It does wonderful things, you know, small town America, but it's understaffed, it's under-resourced. There are traditional museum hierarchies, right, that are always present within these institutions. And so through methods of shared historical authority, we're giving or granting agency to the community itself to be very much involved in the process. And so whether that is that people from across the country have contributed things online through our digital, our contribution process online on the website, or people come to the university on campus. We work together, we go to the School of Information Library Sciences to take photographs, scans, what is appropriate for the artifacts that they bring to us. I mean, really, it's case by case, right, with every single artifact. But it's people-centered, it's community-centered, right? And trying to work together to properly represent the artifacts that they want to see part of their archive in the long run.
First of all, thanks to everybody, to those that organized and to those that are presenting. I'm overwhelmed. I work out at the veterinary school. I'm an associate professor of teaching. I work in this little area called aquatic animal medicine. And our purpose of getting involved was to try to capture and archive the course that's been given since 1998. I'm the last of the faculty, the original faculty that's still standing. How do we archive this? Well, this whole little project is beginning to morph and evolve. And I'm finding that some people have already had these questions. Some people have already, how do I keep in touch with you? But the fact of the matter is there was a question here of how do we know who's going to use this? The creation that we're putting together is not found in any other veterinary school in the United States or in the world. It's not consolidated at a college or professional introductory level. So right now I'm exploring the idea of the students actually creating the chapters. They're the students, they're the ones that are being introduced. How does this chapter need to look to other students that are being introduced? There's all sorts of ideas that are going through my head, but it's not about owning this information, it's about sharing it. And that's why I really feel like this is a place to be today. So thanks for all of your efforts, and I'd like to see a lot more collaboration.
Am I missing any hands that are around the corner here? If I am, be more. Yes, Carol.
You for the opportunity. So we're 2 months away from finishing this project. So it's we have about we have 3 locations: University of Northern Iowa, Ottumwa, if anybody's from Ottumwa, and Waverly. And so we have geolocated many photos. Some of them we have geolocated with a drone, as this one here. So we have drone capability, and we are organizing photos in this case. So it could be anything. In this case, it's dates. So we're organizing things by decade. So right now I'm in Ottumwa in 1890s. And as I go around with the arrows, it's sort of like a, it's a walking tour. This is a, sorry, this one here. I want to show you this cool geolocation. So, you know, it's really fun to do these projects and to show, you know, before and after. And you've seen these stuff before, right? You've seen them even on the New York Times and stuff. But this project is, we want to show that Google doesn't own geolocation. We're specifically not Google. We're all open source, 100% open source and 100% free. I did have a cool conversation with a geography professor at Iowa State's campus. At one point, we talked about collaboration because he was talking about visualizing the campus through historical photos. I'm like, we're doing the same thing, so let's get together. And that conversation needs to be renewed because I've been really busy. But again, like imagine that it's not just downtown, but imagine if it's 1913 suffrage parade in Washington, D.C. Imagine if it's Yosemite State Park. We have a scholar who is trying to tell the story of tourism, the history of tourism in national state parks. Imagine if it's, you know, on Broadway, we have a scholar at University of Iowa who's doing the history of Broadway urban tourism. It's just fascinating stuff. It doesn't have to be photographs. It can be drawings, architectural drawings. So we're trying to imagine how this tool can be used in multiple ways. And we're just really excited to share. We have a little more work to do. These buttons don't disappear yet. And, you know, there's just like, but we're excited about what we built. And please explore and follow us on LinkedIn because we're promoting stuff over LinkedIn, and we have a newsletter that we're trying to, you know, spread our news. And I have my card up here if you want to grab a card. So yes, partner with me, please. Thanks.
Thanks. We have time for about one more question, I think. So.
Hi, my name is Harun. I'm a grad student here at ISU. And my question, I hope, is kind of short, but sometimes it's easy to get people to collaborate and sometimes it's not. So my question is, who were some of the most surprising collaborators you've had in your projects or in your program, like in Vero?
I'm just excited about South America right now. Like there's a new archive we just found out about in Peru, another one in Argentina, and another one in Chile. So it's like, wow, you know, the history of those places is unknown to me. And I'm excited about, you know, taking our code and spreading it globally. So partnerships are really exciting. And collaborations are just thrill me to no end because I'm very collaborative and I don't like to own things or like, I don't know. I like to work with people who are like-minded, and finding those people has been just a total thrill. So, so yeah, that's my answer.
Up on what you just said, I don't think that I've been surprised by collaborations. I've been just thrilled. You know, it's like people just come out of the woodwork and they're like, hey, I've got this idea. And you're like, okay. And I'm going to be at the University of Birmingham in 2 weeks, exactly that way. It was like, you know, I'm doing this project and someone else, and I've been invited. So I don't think that it's difficult or surprising. I think it's just super, super thrilling and exciting. And I guess that's why I do this work or why we all do this work, because it's just so cool.
I think I mentioned a little bit when I was talking that we've had this increase in kind of placing student Vivero fellows with staff departments, and that was something I think that was surprising because the goal for Vivero was really initially to support you know, faculty research and kind of pedagogical digital pedagogy undertakings. But I can't remember, it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, the first kind of request from a staff member came in and we kind of evaluated and said, we have the staff to do this, and this is a digital project that we can kind of open up that umbrella. So I mentioned, you know, someone working with development and alumni relations on that kind of campus film festival kind of archival database project. We've had a student this year is working with our Institute for Global Engagement on a kind of building a site to house digital stories from students who have had like study away or study abroad experiences to be able to share that. trying to think, just kind of example, there's a student working with, I mean, this is a kind of makes sense because it's in the library, but it's working specifically with a staff member on like some 3D printing kind of tools and resources for students who are interested in doing 3D printing. So something that is more of a, you know, things that maybe are filling more of a utilitarian need rather than, okay, we've got this data or this research and how do we want to showcase that. So I think that's been cool to see the way that students can take these same skills and approaches, not just the digital tools, but also the same kind of the approaches and the mindset and the thinking about ethics, and bring that into as they're thinking. Like the student working with the Institute for Global Engagement has been really thinking about like what are the like kind of, as we've done these readings in class relating to things like ethical sharing and kind of collaboration, like what are the ways to make sure that students have the privacy levels that they want in the things that they're sharing on this website. So I think it's cool to see the students bringing that those mindsets into different spheres.
Yeah, and I'll just speak on like the grad student level here. Some of my most unexpected collaborators were people sitting right next to me in my coursework, and being able to make interdisciplinary connections with my project, but also take courses that are highly interdisciplinary as well. So thinking about community engaged research courses, the example that immediately jumps out of my mind is I took this course on working with Native communities, Native American communities, and within the history department. And this was a course made up of all types of disciplines imaginable. And I actually ended up collaborating with folks from the education department, and they had some teaching, like, in-class teaching work they had to do. And one person reached out to me and said, well, I'm working with this teacher who's focusing on like the 1930s, like history of the 1930s, and really interested in, they're reading this book on like railroads and like people who ride railroads. And so would you be willing to come talk to my like 5th and 6th graders about like hobos and tramps? And I said, absolutely, because like Hobo Archive, it's not just there to like, house things, but it's intended to educate and to advocate. And it connects to larger topics like labor and class and, gender and all these other exciting things. And so, I highly encourage, taking opportunity within your graduate studies to make interdisciplinary connections, because they lead to some great unexpected things.
All right, that's all the time we have for questions. So I'm going to hand the mic over to Olivia, and she'll tell us where we go from here.